Hi Year Ones. Thanks for Miss Bashford's wonderful learning about Africa. I know Eliza will be really happy in getting her started to know more about the continent. It's given me a little idea. There's a lovely book that I like called Don't Kick Up a Fuss, Gus. So we're going to take a look today. We're going to do a read aloud, so I'll read the book to you. And then we'll take a look at making a story map out of it. Okay, so before we start reading the story, we're just going to quickly take a look at the front cover. So we can see the title there, Don't Kick Up a Fuss, Gus. And we can see the author, Adria Meserve. There's also a picture of a zebra on the front. A few more zebras here and some animals from Africa. Next, I like to take a look at the blurb. This is on the back page before we open the book, and it tells a little bit about what the story might be about. So let's take a look. Gus did not want to go on a long journey. He wanted to stay at home and play. "Don't kick up a fuss, Gus," said Dad. "It's too hot here. The grass is dry and tough, and the river has nearly dried up." Gus did kick up a fuss though, a really big fuss, and the longer the journey went on, the worse he got. Don't Kick Up a Fuss, Gus by Adria Meserve. Gus was a little zebra who lived in Africa. He loved to gallop and jump about on the hot, dusty savannah. One morning, Gus was playing. It hadn't rained in ages, so the ground was very dry. He stamped his hooves, he reared, he bucked, and he made the biggest dust clouds ever. Just then, Mum called Gus. "Come along, dear, we're going on a long walk." "But I want to make dust clouds," said Gus, digging in his hooves. "Don't kick up a fuss, Gus," said Dad. "It's too hot here. The grass is dry and tough, and the river is nearly dried up." Before Gus could say anything more, his family had trotted off to join the rest of the herd. They walked along a riverbank and through a forest. "Walk nose to tail," Mum told Gus. "No galloping off on your own," said Dad. "Walking is boring," moaned Gus. "I want to go home." Gus's family did their best to make the journey fun. Dad sang 5 Little Zebras with Gus, and Mum sang Here We Go Round the Acacia Tree. When Gus got bored of singing, Grandma played I Spy. "Are we nearly there yet?" asked Gus. "We're much closer," said Grandpa. "Let's play Count the Mongooses." But then they got stuck in a traffic jam. They waited and waited and waited to cross a bridge. Gus got really fed up. "Don't kick up a fuss, Gus," Dad said. "There's nothing we can do." When they finally reached the other side of the bridge, Gus bolted. He leapt between a giraffe's legs and over an elephant's trunk and galloped out of sight. Gus's family were furious when they finally caught up with him. "We're going to finish this walk, even if we have to carry you," said Dad. "Don't kick up a fuss, Gus." But Gus wasn't going to give in just yet. He kicked up the biggest fuss ever. Eventually, Gus wore himself out. "If you've quite finished, we'll carry on," said Dad. "We need to catch up with the others." Mum gently pushed Gus along as they continued on their journey. "No more fussing," she said. At last they stopped and rested for the night. "It will all seem better in the morning," said Mum, nuzzling his mane. The next day they made better progress. Gus knew there was no point in kicking up a fuss. They crossed a river, trekked up and down a mountain, and finally reached the top of a ridge. From there they could see a lush green valley before them. "We're nearly there," cried Mum, and pointed at something glistening in the distance. Gus joined the other zebras as they bounded down the hill, leapt off the grassy bank and landed in the waterhole. Gus thought it was wonderful. He hoped he would never have to leave this place. Gus jumped off rocks, dived into plunge pools and swooshed down waterfalls. He made the biggest waves ever. "We're all getting wet," cried Gus's dad. "Splosh!" "Don't kick up a fuss," shouted Gus, laughing. Okay, so now that we've read through the story, remember that you can go back on the video at any time and listen to it again. You might need to do that to help you with your story map. So we're going to start the story map now. And the reason that we do this is we just make simple drawings or symbols to recreate the story. Now, this is going to help us to rehearse it and retell it in our own way. It doesn't need to be a lovely, all these lovely drawings. The drawings stay quite simple and they basically help us remember all the key parts, the settings, the characters. So I'm going to make a start with it from the beginning of the story, and I'll do a few symbols and then I'll skip to a full story map that I've done. You can press pause and the children could copy that down to help them retell it later on. Okay, we're going to start our story map now. So all you need is a piece of paper and a pencil. We've got our title there, Don't Kick Up a Fuss, Gus. I'm going to read the first page of the story just to remind us a little bit about what we're doing. And it says, Gus was a little zebra who lived in Africa. So I'm going to start here, and trust me, I've tried to draw a zebra. We don't want those detailed pictures. We want those simple symbols. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some stripes to represent the zebra. We're then going to do an arrow, which leads us to Gus was a little zebra who lived in Africa. And I'm going to try my best to sketch out a little symbol of the country. And on this story map, what we're going to do is we're going to just put some keywords on there to remind us later on for the story. So I'm doing next arrow. So Gus was a little zebra who lived in Africa. He loved to gallop and jump about on the hot, dusty savannah. So hot, I'm just going to do a person's face. Trust me, I am not the best drawer, but you don't need to be for these story maps. So this is just a person with a hot, sweaty head and jump about on the hot, dusty savannah. And we're going to do just a savannah there with sort of a tree that you would find on the savannah. That's the end of that page. So I'm going to turn over to the next page and take a look. So one morning, so this is how quick it should be. I'm going to do a number 1 and I'm going to do like a sunrise. So one morning, Gus was playing, so we're going to do Gus again. So we want to bring that arrow round now. The children's drawings will probably be bigger than mine, or some of them will be quite small. So it doesn't matter that your arrow comes at the end, or as long as you're following the flow of the story, the children can fit as many symbols on the paper as possible. So I'm just going to do this little page before I swap over to my full story map. So it says one morning, Gus, so we're going to do the same symbol again. We're not going to change it. Gus was playing. It hadn't rained for ages, so the ground was very dry. So I'm going to say it hadn't rained. So I'm going to draw some raindrops with a cross so they can say it hadn't rained. The ground was very dry. He stamped his hooves. He reared, he bucked, and made the biggest dust cloud ever. Now, I don't really want to do a symbol for all of that, but the dust cloud does come up a little bit later in the story, and so does the hoof. So I'm going to put those two there together. And we're going to finish that for now. Next, I'm going to bring up my full story map. Okay, so here's our full story map. As you can see, it starts off the same as the last one, but this time I've finished it off. I'm flowing all the way down the page with the rest of the story, and I've used simple symbols to help me retell it. Symbols that you might not quite understand. These are my walking shoes. I've got things like symbols that pop up again and again, like family, one I've done there. And here I've put some key words for the key characters in the story. I've also use symbols again and again and again, so once they see those symbols or draw those symbols, they'll know exactly what they mean. Down here I've added a few adjectives green words to help us retell the story. And as you can see, there's sometimes I've made some mistakes, but it really doesn't matter. As long as the drawings are quite simple and the arrows help it flow, they'll be able to retell this story. Okay, so pause the video now. I've also put a link on the home learning so that you can have a shot of this exact story map. But pause it now and make an exact copy. Okay, so now we've done the read aloud,